If it's not, if it is, then it's out. And then we'll just drive on without it. And if you thought it was dark before, anyhow, just want to say Colton knows how to impress the pastor, if you look. Got that beard thing going, shirt, pants. Good call, brother. Great call. Our youth guy over here, Tyler, wears the same kind of boots I do. Talk about men of impeccable taste. I like awkward silences. Anyhow, it's Mother's Day. I hope you don't have 12 o'clock reservations. Just kidding. The clock is turned sideways, so I have no clue what time it is because I can't barely see the numbers, and I don't pay attention to that thing anyway. Exodus chapter 1. Exodus chapter 1. It's a great morning in my house. The Stars lost. They're now 3-2 in the series with those people from St. Louis. I'll pray for their soul. Exodus chapter 1. We're going to go through verse 14. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, all descendants of Jacob, who were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all of his brothers and all that generation, and the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly, and they multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph, and he said to the people, Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with a heavy burden. And they built for Pharaoh storehouses of Pithom and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves, and they made their lives bitter with hard service and mortar and brick and all kinds of work of the field. In all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. All right, kind of catch you up to date. Starting into Exodus, and to get you caught up here, if you go back to the book of Genesis, and how many of you have seen the movie Prince of Egypt or the Ten Commandments? It's not a trick question. I'm not shooting you if you haven't seen it. Except where's the light? She's not here. Where's the light? She's right there. Have you seen those movies? You haven't seen the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston? Okay. We're making progress. What happens is Joseph is sold into slavery. He goes, he lives in Egypt. There's a famine. His brothers come to buy grain. Joseph, they don't know, is now second all over Egypt. You want to read this. This occurs in Genesis, probably starting around chapter 40 and forward. And they come down and they get into to see Joseph, and they don't recognize him. And Joseph kind of plays a trick with them and sends them off. But yet he keeps one brother back. And then the next time they come back, he puts a golden cup in the bag of the youngest brother. And it's just, I don't know. It's kind of like this weird family dynamic thing. You all have them. So then they come, they stay. That's really how this stops. We pick up here in Exodus, and talks about them coming. Now, why is this interesting as well? Remember from last Sunday, what were the things that God told Abraham was going to happen to the children of Israel, to his descendants? They were going to be sojourners in a land that was not theirs. They were going to become slaves. They were going to be oppressed. God was going to crush the oppressor, send them out with his wealth, and use them to crush the Amorites. The first half of this is coming true in the very first few verses of this text. Notice what happens. Joseph is there. Notice the number of people that came to Egypt to see Joseph. 70 in total. About 100, somewhere, some numbers are between 70 to 100 folks actually were there, pal. That was it. So they come, you have about 70 folks, and then notice what happens. When Joseph dies, and all that generation, they began to multiply. About 400 years is the time frame that is given for this period, and in that 400 years, they go from roughly between 70 to 75 folks to well over, some estimates are as high as 4 million. That's a huge population birth, don't you think? We thought we had a boomer generation after World War II. I don't think we had quite as much in that. You had this massive boom, pow, 40 million people. Notice what it says. Notice the lineage description. They were fruitful. They increased greatly. They multiplied, greatly exceedingly strong, and the land was filled with them. There's a lot of adjectives describing that growth. Conversely, look what's going to happen because of that growth. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, behold, the people of Israel are too many, too mighty. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them. Let's look at this. Now, there arose a king that didn't know Joseph. I got 40 million people that I'm terrified of. I've got this large group that continues to grow like gremlins if you drop water on them. Anybody seen the movie? Yeah? Yeah, okay. And I recognize that they are a threat to my internal security, but I forget who Joseph. I mean, that's like saying, I know who these people are, but I don't know how they got here. One of the things that scholars begin to look at is the Jewish people have always been rather xenophobic, and basically what they do is they look inwardly. They get to a place, they really stop being outwardly focused, and they turn inwardly. Wow, they get comfortable and they go, hey, we're just going to live our life here, and we're just going to do these things. And as they continue to grow, the world around them saw them, feared them, and then took action against them. You want to roll this over in our current state of affairs in the United States. You know, we as evangelicals are the largest voting populace in the United States, and we get the government we vote for. And the government we have is lousy because we turn inwardly. We look to our own selfish concerns, or we choose not to vote at all, or we choose to vote for our pocketbook, or we choose to vote for those with the best social issues, or we choose to do these things. And yet, what happens is the world around us is not our ally. The world around us is not our friend. The world around us looks at us and says, these folks are too many, and begin to take action against us. If you've not wondered if there really has been an attack upon the church in recent years, and people go, oh, that's not true. But look at the relationship we now have. You can refuse to do a concert if there's a law saying you can't provide service for an individual, but we can sue you if you refuse to provide service to an individual, if you're a Christian. Our laws are shifting very much against the things that we used to hold very dear, and a lot of times we approach the political season with, I don't really care, or I'm not going to do anything, or I'm going to sit at home, or I don't get involved, or I'm going to let God sort it out, and into captivity you will go. You get the nation you vote for. They got the nation they were a part of. Joseph and his family stopped being involved in all that was going on, because here's the thing. At one time, to be an Egyptian was to be co-located in Egypt. It wasn't a birth thing. That's why Joseph could rise so fast in power. They go, oh, well, you're not from a royal line, Joseph. I'm sorry, you can't do that. That's not how it worked. You got this large group, and so the ruling folks that are around, because they have turned inwardly, xenophobia, look it up, it's a great word. Press your friends with it. The new king looks and says, man, put these guys to work. Got a lot of construction projects for them to do. Now remember, what was the prophecy that God gives to Abram? Know for certain that you will be sojourners. Well, they're there. They start off with 70. They're up in the numbers. And then they will be slaves. Well, let's check out, see if that's coming true. Let's take a look and see what happens here. Behold, the people of Israel are too many, too mighty. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if the war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape the land. Come, let's deal shrewdly. Let's trick them. Let's make them obligated to work for us. Lest, what's the big fear? What's the great fear? They side with our enemies and leave. They side with our enemies and do things and take things away from us, and we no longer are the world power that we are. So what we'll do is we'll trick them. We'll deceive them. They sojourned, they were slaves, and then check this out. Therefore they set taskmasters over them and afflicted them with heavy burdens. And they built for Pharaoh store cities at Pithom and Ramses. Now we're going to stop right there. They put taskmasters over them, and they afflicted them. Within the first 14 verses of chapter 1, all that the Lord had told Abram for the first half of the prophecies that he gives to him has come true. They're sojourners, they're slaves, and now they're afflicted. The great thing is the hope that will come. See, again, we go back to that problem of evil. Right now, they're looking at their affliction and going, oh, God, why? Why? Why does this happen to me? Why does this happen to me? Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. I was a middle child. I know that syndrome so well. Brian, Brian, Brian. Mom likes Brian best. It's my issue, my cross to bear. And they focus there. The first few chapters here, it's filled with darkness. Next week we're going to see a holocaust of newly born children. See, in the problem of evil, they're in that continuum here of it being bad, and yet God has already told his people that not only are you going to go be a sojourner in the land, not only are you going to be a slave, not only are you going to be afflicted, but I'm going to crush that enemy, and then I am going to raise you out. So that prophecy is there, and yet they don't see it. Egypt thinks they've got these people right where they want them. Now, let's go. It's not a rabbit trail. This is intended. Rabbit trails are only the ones I don't intend, so I don't need this morning. Let me ask you a question. This new king that arises, who is he? Let me see a show of hands. How many of you think it's Ramses? Come on, I'm not going to shoot you. I know when people do this. One of the theories is this is the man Ramses, the Pharaoh Ramses the Great. And one of the problems with it being Ramses the Great is a chronological problem. You know, there are two dates for the Exodus event. 15th century date, 13th century date. In typical understanding, the vast majority of folks believe that this is the Pharaoh named Ramses, who is the Pharaoh of the Exodus, and his father is Seti, who is the Pharaoh of the oppression, and they get this based upon the city name Ramses. And then there's some historical evidence that says, well, there's also archaeological evidence that says that, Jericho and Ai and Bethel and Hazor, they were all destroyed about that time. And that's really all you have for that view. And that is the majority view that most people are taught when they go to school. The problem is, there's no biblical support for it at all. The 15th century view has a man by the name of Tutmosis III. He's the emperor or the pharaoh of the captivity, and Amenhotep II is the pharaoh of the Exodus. Well, why this name Ramses is here? I'm glad you asked. If you're Ramses the Great, and he was a little bit narcissistic, it's been known that Ramses has chiseled other pharaohs' faces off of statues and has his face chiseled on them. And has gone around and says, I like this city, and I don't like the fact that this guy built it, so carve his name out and carve my name in. He's been known to do that. If you're Ramses the Great and lean towards the narcissistic, let me ask you a question. You have the opportunity to name a palace city after you or a supply hub. Let me put it in terms that we can understand. You can name a Yugo or a Ferrari. Buy the Yugo, the Ramses Yugo, the Ramses. You go there in this, you may not get back. Buy the Ferrari, the Ramses Ferrari. He was only called the Great because he was Ramses. See, when you think about it, naming a city after yourself, you say, well, if that's all you got, that's nothing. I said, I'm glad you think that's nothing all I've got. If you look in the Bible, 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1, it talks about how when Solomon begins to build the temple, that the temple is built in the 4th year of Solomon's reign, and 480 years earlier, the children of Israel left Egypt. Now, when you add 480 to 960, you get 1440. Ramses ruled in the 1200s. Can't be Ramses. You say, well, that's the only verse you have. Well, actually, no, I don't. If you look at Judges chapter 11, under the story of Jephthah, who was the judge, when he talks to the Amorites and they want their land back, he says, and he's been out, the children have been out of captivity for about 150 years. He looks at them and says, look, for 300 years we've had this land and you've laid no claim. When we came up out of Egypt. So Jephthah dates it, and guess what? Back to the 1440s. The time of Tutmosis II. Well, how do you get this city named Ramses? How do you get the city named Ramses? Oh, well, that's great. If you look in Genesis chapter 47, the children of Israel settle in the land of Ramses, in the district of Ramses. I built a city in the district of Ramses. Good chance I named it after the district I built it in. You say, well, is that all you got? Well, no, there's some other interesting data as well. Tutmosis IV, who is the grandson of Tutmosis II, writes in his chronicles that he was an illegitimate heir because the heir that should have been emperor died suddenly in a tragic death. The firstborn child thing. His grandson, Akhenaten, is the only monotheistic pharaoh in all of Egypt's history. Moves the capital out from all the gods and goes out into the deserts, and once he dies, the Egyptian pharaohs destroys everything and bury it, trying to eliminate his understanding. The only monotheistic one. Now, interesting, if your people just got the stuffings kicked out of them by a monotheistic God, do you think that has an impact on the grandchildren? If you have an emperor that says, hey, I'm not the real legitimate heir, the firstborn child died suddenly in an event, you think that has an impact in things? But we also have archaeological evidence. Jericho also has a destruction layer from the 14th century, or from the 15th century. So does Hazor. One view, the word Ramses in Exodus chapter 1. One view, 3 scripture verses, and a historical evidence within the cultural evidence of within Egypt itself. Let me ask you a question. How many of you ever knew that it was Tutmosis II? Where did you build your theology from? The 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston? The Prince of Egypt? You say, well, Brother Ashley, what does that matter? So what? 5th century, 13th century, what does it matter? Folks, if you do not take the time to focus on the things like this, will you really take the time on the big things? I can take, and with a 13th century view, roll back your understanding of the Old Testament, because none of your dates work after that. None of your all your problems that you have with liberal theology comes in with this. You end up having the folks that come along and say, well, it really wasn't a divine intervention. It was actually 12 tribes that come. I can begin to roll back your understanding of the text with that understanding of the 13th century view. What does it matter? Because I can destroy your understanding of the Old Testament very quickly from that position. So what? Well, I'm going to ask you a question. Does it matter where you get your theology from? Does it matter that you are involved in the events in the world in which you live in, instead of becoming very inwardly focused as the Jews had become and now are slaves. And doesn't matter where you build your theology from, because here's the thing, unchecked, you're going to have children to think that the Nephilim were rock creatures going, I was sent here because I was bad. If you've ever seen the movie Noah, you would understand that reference. Where do you get your theology from? '15th century view, 13th century view, who cares? Jesus fully God, Jesus totally God, Jesus partly God, Jesus, who cares? Is that really consequential? And a lot of times we bring that to all the philosophy that we bring about the text. Does it matter if I vote? Does it matter if I don't? See, we see how haphazardly that mindset works its way into all that we have. Should I be involved with the nation that I'm in? No. Let's just focus inwardly. Let's pick up. Rabbit, not officially a rabbit trail, but officially shot. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. And the more they spread. And the Egyptians were in dread of them. Notice this equation. The more they are oppressed, the more they multiply. And the more they spread. As you're going through your study in the book of Acts, did the oppression of the early church stunt its growth? And the answer is absolutely not. It actually fueled its growth. The Christian organization, the people of God, have this unique historical coincidence, if you want to take the spirituality out of it, in that when they are oppressed, they seem to grow. Here in Egypt, they began in the oppression, and they continued. If the goal was to eliminate the Jews through oppression and hard labor, you are going about it the wrong way. If the goal was to eliminate the early church through oppression, you're going about it the wrong way. And if you look in times of history, and you look at when the Jews stop growing or when the church stops growing, it's when they become friends with the government that they have. When oppression is not high. Why? Because we grow comfortable in our faith. We grow comfortable where we are. The Jews grew comfortable in the land that they were. They were in the land of Goshen. They were in a great place. They were in a very fertile land. They could farm, grow stuff all day long. Who cares about the outside world? We do that today. We grow comfortable where we are in our world. And, we are 80s Republicans. It's a great time. The religious right, the evangelical resurgence. We were living great. We grew comfortable. And we've grown complacent. And typically, we fail to learn a huge lesson. The adage, those who do not learn from history are destined to repeat it. You figure we would catch on after a while. This has been going on since the 14th century BC, and it just keeps trucking right on along. There's nothing wrong with having nice things. There's nothing wrong with having interaction with the government. There's nothing wrong with seeking to be in part of your world's culture. But usually what happens is we are not in the engagement part on the cultural stage. We are typically in the receiving part upon the cultural stage. One of the great flaws, I think, that I hear from most evangelicals is I don't talk what? Two things. I don't talk religion and we are in the world shape that we are in because we do neither. I don't talk religion, I don't talk politics. Then you are settled for what you have. Because precisely the reason why you are here is not to talk religion as in all world religions, and the fact that you have a one true religion founded upon the one true God and are brought to salvation through His only Son, and yet we sit and we go, I don't talk religion or politics because I don't want to make somebody mad. I don't talk politics as a Christian because, everybody's view is equal. Let me tell you something, folks. Not every view is equal. There are people out there that are not very smart. And they proclaim it openly. Whether on Facebook or in the paper or on TV or on a blog, or on the radio, or whatever media they choose to blast openly, they demonstrate their lack of knowledge in politics, in religion. And yet we sit and we go, don't do that. I just don't do that. If there is no counter argument to the false things being put out, will people ever hear the truth? We have the greatest news ever. They had the greatest news ever because they had a prophecy that God gives directly to Abram in which he says, "Know for certain you will wander, you will be slaves, you will be oppressed, but I am going to punish that nation and you are going to leave with their wealth." Great news. Because the future hope. The oppression will be great. The oppression will be hard. Yes, you will be afflicted greatly. Yes, you will go through times of great torment. Yes, but you have a future hope in that God has promised that your descendants will leave with the wealth of the land. You have a greater hope in that what Christ has done for you upon the cross, that while you suffer in this transitory state, you have the future hope of the resurrection that you will have with the Lord Jesus Christ. And we live defeated because, we just don't talk politics. And we just don't talk religion. Man, this world has really gone to pot. I don't know how to fix it. I just let the Lord fix it. Instead of speaking the truth to power, and bringing light to darkness, instead of bringing the truth of the gospel message into your conversations when people espouse things that are absolutely moronic. Folks, there is a belief in our system today that the Muslim faith and the Christian faith are equal faiths. Let's just pick one. They're equal. In one, you have all this legalistic work to do to hopefully appease a God who may let you into heaven. In the other, you have a loving God who sends His Son to earth to die in your place so that a way is made possible for you to enter into heaven. Outside of works, outside of activities. Why? Because there's nothing good about any of you. There's nothing good about me. I look back at my life, there is nothing redeeming about a lot of my life as a young man. Why the Lord chose to redeem me baffles me to this day, but I am grateful to God that He did. You have that message. You have that message of hope. You have that message to the individual who is going through the midst of great turmoil, and instead of voicing that message, you don't talk religion, and you don't talk politics, and you sentence an individual to continue in the path that they are on. Will it cost you, people? Yes. It will cost you, friends. Convictions will cost you. I believe it is Winston Churchill says, "You have enemies? Good! That means you've stood for something in your life." You know what you get when you ride the fence? A sore fifth point of contact. That's your behind for those of you that don't speak Army. When you try to appease everyone, you appease no one. You have in this text the unfolding of Genesis chapter 15 right before your very eyes. In the very first 14 verses. You will be a sojourner. You will be a slave. You'll be oppressed. And a lot of times we stop right there. Not with, but you will eventually leave with the wealth of that land. And what wealth it had. Capable of building an entire nation. We stop there with the bad news. When we have the message of hope that transforms lives. When we have the message of hope that if we were to rally together, we could transform nations. But yet we don't. and boldly proclaim that we should not do so. Let's finish up. The Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel, so they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves. They made their lives bitter with hard service. In mortar and in brick and all kinds of the work of the field and all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. This is not a polite scene. This is not a pretty picture. Next Sunday we will look at a Holocaust that will occur. This is not pleasant. Your life as a believer will not be a pleasant life. If you want a pleasant life, there's a guy in Houston that sells that with big teeth and nice hair. Go see him. If you want a religion that is easy and pain-free, it's not Christianity. G.K. Chesterton once said that Christianity has not ever been tried, or has not been tried and been found wanting. It has been tried and been found difficult. If you're looking for a pain-free faith, saying nothing will not do it. You will still have pain. You will still have suffering. The life of the believer, the life of the people of God, is a life marked with a road of hardship at times and then of great glory in other times. And for us to expect only the good times is to be very myopic in our understanding of how the world runs and how the life of the believer runs. But even in the moments of great hardship, we still have the future hope that was won for us by the risen Lord. That we have obtained salvation, and that one day this transitory life ends and eternity begins with the Father in heaven. Where do you focus your aim? Where do you focus your hope? In the midst of the pain, in the midst of the oppression, in the midst of the storm, in the midst of all the things that are going on around you that are bad, or on the future hope that will come? As we begin to peel back the book of Exodus, we will see that God raises up a man who wants nothing to do with this message. You got the wrong guy. Now I got the right guy. Where do you fit on this continuum? Are you xenophobic in your understanding of the world and its politics and don't talk religion and politics, thus sentencing people to live and die not knowing who Jesus Christ, their Lord and Savior, is? Do you approach the text with a movie theology to where you get your theology from whatever movie comes along or blog site you get instead of actually going into the text and looking over? Because here's the thing, all those verses I quoted were in the chronological reading. You read them if you read it chronologically. Do you put your focus in upon the midst of the storm and go, it can't get any worse than this? And focus only here, rather upon the future hope that comes with the risen Lord? How do you choose to live your life? How do you approach the text? How do you approach your responsibility to your God? You are here today, and you say, I have no concept of who this God is or why He would die for me or why He would send His Son to take my place upon the cross. I'd love to sit and talk with you about the transformative work of our Lord and Savior who could save a wretch as me and change a hardened heart. As the praise band comes to sing, I ask also that if you have been coming for a while and you say, I've enjoyed what I like, I've enjoyed being here amongst the fellowship of this church, and I'd like to join and be part of the fellowship of Skyline Baptist, I'll be here at the front as well with my microphone turned off. If you'll please stand as the praise band sings.